It's my first day back at work. Figured I would ease into things a little bit. It's June. So obviously June 1st is a huge day in the NFL, but thought we'd dip our toe in the water, ease back into things. And the league and the Rams had other plans. Myles Garrett heading to Los Angeles in exchange for, as we know right now, Jared Verse, a 2027 first round pick, and additional considerations, which we're not exactly sure what those terms are, but those are the major pieces. First, a Verse and a first round pick. Your initial thoughts, Derek, on Myles Garrett going out to LA?
I mean, my initial thought on, we don't know the extra compensation. I don't care what the extra compensation is. The best team in the NFL, arguably the best roster in the NFL, just acquired Myles Garrett, who I just think that this is funny that they spent 2 years of not having a generational Hall of Fame best in the NFL defensive line talent. And we're like, you know what? All these young guys, they're cool. I want that guy again. I want the best to ever do it at his position. I would like that guy.
For the Rams, I don't think it matters. For the Rams, and it matters to an extent. The additional compensation, I'm more worried about it from the Browns end of things, because when I look at this at first glance, right, maybe you see this a little bit differently. Maybe this is the wrong kind of mindset, but my thought is that's it.
That's what I was talking to Beller right before this one, because he called me 15 minutes ago and he was like, "Hey, buddy." And I was like, "We're doing a show, aren't we?" He was like, "Yes, we are." And I was like, my first thought was like, Jared Verse and a first round pick. And even if this other thing is like a third round pick, dude, this is Myles Garrett. He's consistently the best pass rusher in the NFL. I thought, even if you assume that like Jared Verse himself is worth a first round pick, I totally get that. It felt like there would be more.
I think Jared Verse right now is, you get 2 years of cost control for Jared Verse, like $4 million plus the 5th year option. Jared Verse, the best thing you could hope for in any given first round is finding a player like Jared Verse. Like, I think he is worth a first round pick and probably a little bit more. So, and that, I get it. Like, that's a huge get for the Browns, but we're less than a year removed from Micah Parsons netting 2 first round picks plus Kenny Clark. And I know that Micah Parsons is 4 or 5 years younger than Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's 30. I think this is age 31 season. So he's a little bit older. You assume you get maybe 3 really Myles Garrett-esque seasons left from him. But even if that's all that's left in the runway for Myles Garrett, the fact that we had 2 firsts plus a player for Micah, and then it's just Jared Verse and a first and maybe a couple other things thrown in there, I just assume that the Browns could potentially get a little bit more, and maybe from another team they could have, right? Like, maybe from another team you can get 2 firsts and a second, 2 firsts, a second, and a fourth. But maybe the Jared Verse part of this was attractive enough where there's certainty he has the potential to be a top 10 player at a premium position. We would rather have that because that's more valuable to us than a first round pick or a first and a second round pick. I can understand that. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't seem like a ton to give up if you're the Rams, because if you look at the cap situation too, his cap hit over the next few years is like 20. So I'm looking at it right now. It's 24 million this year, 28 million in 2027, and 30 million in 2028. It goes up in 2029 and 2030, but it's really pumped up in those years. And so you can absorb the contract pretty easily if you're the Rams, and you're giving up Jared Verse and just next year's first. That's all you're doing to maximize this window. So I thought it might cost a little bit more to do this, even if you can acknowledge that Jared Verse is a really good and valuable player.
So actually, though, now that we're sitting and talking about it, I do still think from the Rams' perspective, it doesn't feel like they gave up a lot. Like, upgrading from Jared Verse to Myles Garrett and only really having to give up probably a first to do it, that doesn't feel like a lot. This probably is fine for the Browns, though. Like, Jared Verse is, like you said, as good as you're going to get for a first-round pick, another first-round pick on top of it, and especially if this extra compensation is like, maybe it is a third round pick. And that's actually pretty good. Like, if that's where they arrive. So like, it is a weird spot where it doesn't feel like the Rams, given their scenario and where they are and what they are trying to accomplish, didn't give up like that much to get a player like Myles Garrett. But also at the same time, it's not like the Browns really had that much power in a situation like this, right? Like, Myles Garrett himself is worth a lot, but the Browns are not really in any sort of position to wield against people because they're the Browns, and they're just probably going to be bad for the next handful of years.
Well, I think for the Browns, we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of months. We had danced around the idea of why a Myles Garrett trade would make sense for the Browns, because they're in a spot where they only have their first round pick next year. Or if you somehow wind up with the 10th pick in the draft and you're not really in a position to get a quarterback, like what does that mean for you over the next couple of years? You've had a really nice offseason. You've done a great job of building an infrastructure for whoever that quarterback is eventually going to be. But do you feel good going into the 2027 draft with just your first round pick in a world where you kind of have to come out of that draft with a quarterback? I think both of us thought I'd feel a little bit antsy if that were the case. So now, even if it's a late first round pick, maybe the 32nd pick in the draft, you have another one, and you have a guy in Jared Verse where he can be a part of a timeline that you realistically should be on. Like, this team is not going to be competitive, most likely, in 2026, 2027, and maybe even into 2028. Now you have Jared Verse is going to be, how old is Jared Verse now? 24?
He was like a little bit older coming to the league, but he can't be more than like 25, 26.
So Jared Verse right now is 25. So this is, and so he'll turn 26 this year. So Jared Verse will be 28 when you get to that 2028 season when you can be competitive. So it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think overall, the fact that you came out of this with the ammunition to hopefully push your way toward a quarterback in next year's draft, and you still have a very, very good edge rusher, that is a decent place to land if you're the Browns at the end of all of this, even if at the same time, it's still like, you look at it, it's like, man, if I were the Rams, I think I do that every single time to maximize whatever the next couple of years look like. 2 years, probably.
You do that every single day of the week. And I know it's funny. We spent so much time, especially I did during the draft, of being like, why did they take Ty Simpson? Like, they needed to do something to help Matthew Stafford and help the offense or help them win. And what's funny is that the time that the Rams actually did get to the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, it's when the defense on the other side had like absolute superstar freak show talent on that side. Like, Aaron Donald ended that Super Bowl. And so obviously Myles Garrett, plays a slightly different position, but you've talked about a million times, you need that sort of pass rusher to really get things over the line. And like, Jared Verse probably was that, and it's probably more unlucky than anything that the Rams didn't get there with him being what he was the last couple of years. But Myles Garrett is a little bit more certainty that, yes, when it is like January that he can deliver that for you.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And so now you have Myles Garrett. You still have Byron Young, who had a nice season last year. You have a deep defensive line. We know what they did at the cornerback position this offseason with Trent McDuffie and Watson. The safety room is very good. Like, the defense top to bottom is spectacular. And then obviously we know what the offense is. The Rams, there's a few different thoughts in my head after kind of considering what the next few years are going to be. One, they have all of these free agents after this season, like Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Puka. Like, and I there's so many questions about who they're going to bring back, how they're going to spend that money. So that just kind of looming over this season and like what the 2027 and 2028 Browns look like, or Rams look like. I think there's a lot to chew on there. And then you extend that to, when does Matthew Stafford stop playing? Because I get you're trying to do everything you can to maximize the Matthew Stafford window that you're in right now. But with no Jared Verse and no 2027 first round pick, now you're in a spot where it's like, all right, well, whenever the Ty Simpson part of this starts, we are going to be a very diminished version of the roster compared to what we could have been. And so that part of it is tough for me, because I think part of the rationalization for drafting Ty Simpson is, even if we think that he has a lower ceiling relative to a lot of other first round prospects, if we get average quarterback play with Sean McVay and then just a stacked roster elsewhere, can Ty Simpson keep us competitive? Well, after doing this, your pathway to a stacked roster everywhere else, I think, becomes a lot harder to pull off into like 2028 and 2029 without a Jared Verse and without that first round pick. And so it almost, to me, makes the Ty Simpson thing even harder to rationalize, because you've pushed your chips so far in to the next couple years that now this idea of, well, we have quarterback certainty, or at least a quarterback plan beyond this, it almost matters less to me, because you have fewer assets to build out the rest of it around Ty Simpson when you get there.
Right. You're going to have fewer assets to do that. And like that style of roster where it's like, if we could get average quarterback play and then the rest of the roster is star-studded, the Rams roster as it currently works is kind of like they've got 4 or 5 stars, and then they have a handful of other decent role players, but like they've built this thing together with 3rd round picks and 4th round picks, or they're on the cutting edge of like doing all this weird, adding 3 tight ends on the field sort of stuff. Like they're always winning in the margins around like 3 or 4 superstar players. But one of those is the quarterback, and he allowed them to do so many different things. And so if Simpson is only average, I do think it kind of changes the calculus here. the Stafford thing is also interesting because I think even going into last year, obviously, and then even going into this offseason, it's been a lot of, well, this is going to be the last ride. This is going to be the last ride. But it seems like there's more reporting that like Matthew Stafford might play for 2 years. He might want to play for 3
years. He just signed a
like,
contract extension. I mean,
exactly.
They now have him under contract for 2 years. And so now I think every single thing that has happened after the Ty Simpson selection, I think makes the Ty Simpson move and the plan around it age just a little bit worse. And that's not the most important thing here, right? Like if the Rams win the Super Bowl this year, I think we'll care much less about what the 2028 and 2029's Rams look like. I just think that this move now, again, colors the Ty Simpson decision a little bit differently than it even was when they made it in late April.
And you know what, to backtrack a little bit in terms of all the free agents that you mentioned that they're going to have up, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua, obviously guys like that.
Steve Avila too. Like there's
Avila,
Kobe Turner. I mean, there's just a ton of guys that
because how much did we say
addressed.
It's like it's outside of Matthew Stafford and Devontae Adams. It's a pretty young roster. Like obviously the way they built the defensive line, some of the guys on the interior, like it's a young roster. To me, bringing in a Myles Garrett it kind of makes it easier to not pay the guys that you're going to have on that defensive line. Like when Kobe Turner comes up, Byron Young comes up, it's a little bit easier to, and obviously they would have had to pay Jared Verse, obviously. It makes it easier to maybe move on from those guys and be like, we can just find another 3rd round pick, 2nd round pick, whatever, because Myles Garrett is such a presence that kind of lifts all the other guys around him that you don't necessarily need to pay Byron Young, even if you would have going into maybe this next offseason.
But yeah, I think that's fine for the short term, or at least makes sense for the short term.
Right.
For the long term, again, it's like the type of roster you were hoping you would have with all of these young, promising players. If you now have to move on or choose to move on from some of those young, promising players, the long-term or multi-year plan around Ty Simpson just dramatically changes. And it seems like they're okay with that because they're looking at the team that they have right now and being like, this is it. Like it is all for right now. But if it's all for right now, then why did you take Ty Simpson with the 13th overall pick? Even if I understood it in the moment, but I think it's harder and harder to rationalize as you've continued to do things like this.
Well, so I think it's that, and I don't even think this is wrong. This is, to me, a front office operating with hubris. Like we just said the Aaron Donald thing. He retires, and they replace him in the aggregate and in a 100th percentile way. It could not have gone better with Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Braden Fist, Byron Young, like all of these young guys. I bet they think like, well, if we bring in Myles Garrett and these other young guys move on, we can do it again in the 2nd round. We can draft another Kobe Turner. We can draft another Byron Young. Like, why can't we? Like, it feels like they are probably operating under that sort of scope.
The Rams defense now looks absolutely insane. They were already the Super Bowl favorites before they do this. And now having Ty Simpson and having a plan at quarterback, at least over the next couple of years, always gave you the option, if you wanted to start throwing these 1st round picks around, because that's the downside, right? Trading away future 1st round picks, the most dangerous thing you can do, or the most dangerous final outcome of that is if you find yourself without a quarterback and you don't have a 1st round pick, you're essentially SOL for how you're going to find that quarterback. By drafting one and having him under contract for the next 5 years, you can be a little bit looser with how you're using these. And so seeing them trade one away to go get Myles Garrett maybe shouldn't be surprising. So the Rams, we understand this. Let's just revisit the Browns again for one quick second. You look at the Browns roster right now, you have Jared Verse, a couple other like decent pieces along the defensive line. Like Alex Wright has been solid for them. Obviously we know what Carson Schlesinger was last year. Mason Graham is there. The defense overall, I think, has some decent pieces on it. Now the offense is completely remade and you're dropping Jared Verse into that situation. How do you currently feel about the makeup of the Browns roster, what their offseason has looked like, and just what the overall trajectory of this thing feels like?
I mean, it's kind of hard. Like, this is a situation where defensively, it's easy to buy a lot of the young talent. Like, I think Schlesinger is a pretty special linebacker. Mason Graham was fine last year. They have a pretty deep defensive line. Like, even Malik Collins was a monster last year.
Yes, he was.
Obviously got hurt. And so,
Malik Collins is like, that one I care less about. Like, Malik Collins is going to be 32,
Yeah, it doesn't matter by the time
he just turned 31, actually. He's younger than I thought he was. Exactly. Malik Collins to me is not like a foundational piece of what this is going to
but he's at least still for this year, potentially a useful player for them. But I think I like a lot of the foundation, especially up front. I imagine the secondary, by the time they are competitive, those guys are going to be a little bit older in some of those spots, or at least closer to 30.
Yeah.
So you wonder how that's going to be reshaped. But I still like a lot of the way that the front is being retooled. I just think so much of this just comes down to like not even what the quarterback play is going to look like this year. Obviously, the quarterback play doesn't really matter. They are clearly doing a lot of these moves in service of making sure they have ammo for Arch or Lenore Sellers or Dante Moore, whoever it's going to be. I still have a lot of questions about what the infrastructure is going to look like. Like the offensive line should be better because it's a lot of new pieces, and we think that can do something for them. But I don't know, that they still, to me, have a lot of questions at the pass catcher spots outside of, Harold Fannin is a really exciting player, but they still have a lot of questions there. And then even like Quinshon Judkins played incredibly well last year.
They've given themselves options though with the pass catchers.
Right. They're trying. Yes,
we have no idea
rookies, but
if those guys are going to be good, but at least they have a plan for how that group is going to be remade. I mean, they drafted 2 of those guys in their first like 45 picks.
But again, until we know, I feel a little bit scared about how that's going to look, which it's a weird spot too, because I really do think that Todd Monken is a really good play caller. And I think we're probably more down on him than or not necessarily us, but like it just feels like there's not as much excitement around him. One, because he's in Cleveland now, and I don't think it would be easy to get excited about anything in Cleveland. But also too, just last year was weird for Baltimore, and it's almost like we forget how good the 2023 and 2024 offenses were. So I could see a world where this thing, they win 6 games and the offense looks like it has a good infrastructure and you can buy yourself on the defense. But there is a weird part of me that is like, it feels like Myles Garrett was such a special thing on the defensive side that kind of gave this team an identity, even if they were still bad, that I wonder what it looks like with him being pulled out of there.
Can I galaxy brain it for a second?
Let's hear it.
Maybe it looks just worse enough that you just are in a position to draft the quarterback next year without having to use that extra first round pick.
That's possible. Like Myles Garrett might have been with the other players around him. Obviously, they're like the defense might have been good enough that because you could totally see the world where they were like the 5th best defense in the league next year, and that's enough to win them too many games. Whereas like Jared Verse is great, but I don't think he's that level of Myles Garrett where he's like pulling a defense up to that level by himself.
I think the best case scenario here is that you probably are just bad enough on your own to be drafting in a spot where you can draft a quarterback in the top like 7 picks. Like let's just play this out a year. Let's say 4 quarterbacks go in the top half of the first round, which I don't think is crazy based on what this is projecting to be as a draft. So let's say you can get one of those guys just with your own pick, and then you have an extra first round pick to draft some piece, like it's another edge rusher, it's a corner, it's whatever. That to me feels like the best case scenario for this. And then you still have Jared Verse, right? Like you still have a really important pillar for like what you're building moving forward. That's the best case scenario, because I can't imagine a world. It's hard to imagine a world, because I think it's easy to say like, well, now you have an extra first round pick. Can you use that to maneuver around a little bit to find a quarterback if you're not in a position to draft one? You can probably do that for like the 3rd or 4th quarterback. I think it's going to be hard to do that at the top of the draft, because if you're a team drafting at the top, you probably need a quarterback. Like even the Dolphins with Malik Willis, that's like the only team that is probably projected to be very bad that theoretically has a multi-year answer at quarterback. But even them, they'd probably move on from him if they are picking number 1 and Arch is there, right? But if you're the Jets, if you're the Cardinals, you need that quarterback. The 32nd pick is probably not going to be enough for you to be like, yeah, you know what, we'll move down. Like you can come up and get it. So I just don't think that Rams pick is probably going to give you the ammunition to move around that we're making it out to be right now. So, but the best case is probably you just have an extra first round pick and your pick lands you in a spot where you can draft a quarterback. And not having Myles Garrett actually makes it more likely that would end up happening, because even with how you've built up the infrastructure on offense, I still think the quarterback play is going to be bad enough where you could feel good about the future of the offense after this year. You could look at a Denzel Boston and a Concepcion and a Fano and the way they rebuilt the offensive line and think, oh, we did the right things. We were still the 28th best offense in the league. Like that outcome is totally within the realm of possibility for the Browns. And so you doing that combined with the defense being like the 17th best defense because Myles Garrett isn't there, that's not actually the worst thing and the worst way for this to play out if you're the Browns.
It's really not. And honestly, that's a good point about we say so often that, oh, you can just trade up for the quarterback. And that is true if a guy falls to 8, where he falls to 10 or 11, like
JJ
the
McCarthy.
Mac Jones,
You
Justin
can trade
Fields,
up for JJ
range.
McCarthy or Justin Fields. Yes, those are the guys you can trade up for.
Or like Ryan Tannehill, I think, went in this range. Like you can go and get those kinds of guys. The guys who are almost like feel like they are locked into the top 3. Well, why the hell would those teams trade out of those picks? Unless it was just like an insanely unlucky year for that team and like their star quarterback got hurt. Like if, obviously they didn't take a quarterback year, but the year the Cowboys, like Tony Romo just gets super banged up and they're get the 5th pick. Like teams like that, you can maybe trade out and get the quarterback. But otherwise, like if they're picking top 3, they probably need one too. Why the hell would they trade out of it?
There is a chance though. I'm trying to figure out.
It happens sometimes. The last time
like this would
the
look like.
Titans situation was the last time that really happened, right? Where they took Mariota and then they were awful again. And then they had the first overall pick, I think, and traded that to the Rams for Goff. It's like that can happen, but it just doesn't feel like that's a very likely scenario.
Oh, how about let's do this. Let's just play it out this way. Let's say the Raiders are really bad this year. The Raiders have like the 4th pick in the draft. You are picking 9th if you're the Browns, because again, the moves you made on offense were good enough. Mm-hmm. That extra first-round pick in that scenario might be worth it. The moral of the story here is, and I think this is the landing place I would get to, it's better to have the first-round pick as a way to move around for the quarterback than it is to not have it, even if we overstate how often these scenarios happen. So I think that's an important part of it. Mm-hmm. So we do have the final terms on the deal. And this does make me feel a little bit better about this if you're the Browns. It's verse a 2027 first, a 2028 second, and a 2029 third. So it's a decent amount of draft capital over a multi-year period. So it's that's a decent amount. Like even that like 2028 second kind of changes the haul that you're getting. I thought it would be like additional terms, like one throw-in pick. It's a second-round pick in 2028 and a 2029 second-round pick. That's a pretty good haul when you also include Jared Verse in this thing.
So, my immediate thought on this feels like the most NBA-style trade that we've maybe ever gotten in the NFL, where it's like a star player moving, and it's picks that are 3 seasons out in advance. Like we're about to play the 2026.
Well, the Browns are the team that wants to be able to do it 5 years in advance.
That's right. They're the ones lobbying for it. Exactly.
This is Andrew Barry's heaven.
Exactly. But this really feels like, I mean, the Rams have always been willing to make these style of trades more than any other team, but trades that far out in the future, and also for a player of this caliber, it just doesn't feel like this happens in this league very often. This feels like a very NBA style of trade.
And what we were saying before about the ability to build a team around Ty Simpson and build the type of team you would need to in order to be a really competitive team with a quarterback like Ty Simpson, that again becomes even harder when you're trading away 2nd and 3rd round picks into his tenure as the team's quarterback. Mm-hmm. So we already knew that the Rams were truly pushing all of their chips in here to try to maximize whatever this looks like with Matthew Stafford. Now that we have the full terms, I think that's hammered home with even more authority. I mean, they're doing everything they can here to make sure this group wins a Super Bowl. The next couple of years be damned. And that's just kind of a tough mindset when you just drafted a quarterback in the 1st round that's not going to play for 2 more seasons.
Well, what's funny about the Ty Simpson thing is I keep going back and like waffling on like, man, that just feels like such a scared is the wrong term, but like you are being very safe by like just making sure that we got a quarterback and we'll see how it goes. And then on the other hand, when they do shit like this, it almost makes me wonder, like they think they are so good and they are so locked into the Super Bowl for the next 2 years that like drafting Ty Simpson is like, house money. If he's good, he's good. If he's not, who gives a shit? Like they're in such a unique position with the way that they do these things. I don't even know if I believe
so,
that, but like I could totally,
like,
yeah. You know what I mean?
I guess so, but having like one more pass catcher, if you're like really trying to win the Super Bowl, like it's having Mekhi
that
Lemon.
Pick should be Monroe Freeling or Mekhi Lemon or something.
Yes, even if you want to say like, the pass catching spots are in pretty good shape, even having like tackle depth as a way to insulate yourself from something like this, or insulate yourself from like a worst case scenario, is probably worth it if you're trying to do everything you can to maximize the next couple seasons. So we shouldn't be surprised based on the aggressiveness that the Rams have been willing to show us over the last decade. But this is still, even for them, feels like a hyper aggressive sort of move. And now that we've seen the full compensation kind of come into effect or come into light and come into focus here for the Browns, I understand it from their perspective. Like, we are probably not going to be a championship caliber team when Myles Garrett is playing at the level we've come to understand from Myles Garrett. Like, you are getting the right amount of value for a player like Myles Garrett to maximize the long-term health of your franchise by doing something like this. And from both sides, I understand it, but still not necessarily what I expected us to be talking about here on June 1st with Myles Garrett headed to the Rams. But a fun way to start the summer here on the Athletic Football Show, I'll tell you that much.
It sure was. I thought we were going to get an A.J. Brown trade and not do a live show because we've all assumed that he would already be on the Patriots, and so we wouldn't have to do anything.
Any other closing thoughts here about Myles Garrett heading to the Rams?
I'm just in the same way that we saw Matthew Stafford, who was an incredibly talented first overall pick, never be able to put it together on his team, go and be able to like really piece together a final Hall of Fame style of career. I'm excited to see Garrett do that. I think Garrett, because of the position he plays and the accolades, was already that, obviously, but hopefully get a ring on it. It would be cool. Yeah, he would have been a Hall of Famer like 2 years ago if you just cut off his career, but to at least be able to more realistically have a chance at capping it off with a ring, I think is really cool, because I truly do think that there are too many special all-time players who never get that and never get like that many real chances at it. And for a guy like him, who at no point in the first, 7-8 years of his career even was able to sniff that, for him to be able to walk into a place where you assume for the next 2 years they are probably the favorite, that's just really cool. And I'm excited to see him get his chance at that.
I 100% agree with that. Here's the other side of it, though. I can't remember which show it was, but Dave was talking about how I was pushing back on Dave, saying that nothing matters for the Rams until you get to the end of the season and see how it goes. Like, you can't enjoy whatever the ride looks like for the entirety of the 2026 season if you don't end up winning the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh, come on. Like, if you're a fan of a team, it's great. Like, your team is good. Your team is exciting. Your team is entertaining. They're fun to watch. Like, you can still enjoy the process, even if you ultimately don't get there at the end. Now that's off the table. Like, now, like, there is just, if you're the Rams, there is so much riding on the next couple seasons for so many different reasons that it just puts like an inconceivable amount of pressure for you to pull this off over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'm there with that line of thinking now too. This really is like, if you don't win the Super Bowl, it kind of feels like you have the most valuable player on both sides of the ball. That just never happens. That just doesn't happen. Like, literally the MVP last year in Matthew Stafford, and you can say, Josh Allen, whatever. And then Myles Garrett being what he is, like, this just doesn't happen very often. Like, it's a very unique position they've got themselves in terms of hype and like what people actually would expect from them. It's pretty cool.
Looking at it right now, it'd be like 25.5 million of dead money for Myles Garrett next year, I believe, for the Browns. And then obviously Deshaun Watson is still Deshaun Watson would be like 35 million. And so the Browns wouldn't have like a crazy amount of cap space to throw around next year, but they'd have like $50-ish million in space as it currently stands. And so for the first time in a while, they would actually have some financial flexibility to build around the core that we're talking about here. And hopefully they would have a rookie quarterback as part of that. And if that is the most important part of this for the Browns at the end of the day. Like, the end result of this needs to be them finding a quarterback that they're excited about in next year's draft, hopefully with their own pick. And then they have the extra first, but even if not, then using that extra one to move around a little bit, like, that is a necessary part of this entire plan coming together for the Browns. Is them coming away from next year's draft with the quarterback. If they can do that, plus Jared Verse, plus some of the stuff that they've done on offense, I think that there is a world where they can dig themselves out of this in a way that is a pretty decent endpoint for a Browns fan base that has been through some awful shit over the last few years.
Yeah, what a long road it would have been to rebuild that way.
All right, that is all we've got. We will be back with a ton more stuff this week. We're going to have shows every day, starting back on. We already had the mailbag today, so if you've not checked out the mailbag, please do that. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we will be back with shows. So it'll be 4 shows a week all throughout the summer, starting this week. So please be on the lookout for all that. For now, that's all we got. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.